I think that it's failed. Whenever I've seen them, actually, I would ask my husband to tell you but he'll get on a rant, and we'll never get out of here, about efforts where we have seen, business people come in and say, oh, here's what you have to do, and then they'll do a big reorganization that will make us be like business. And where my husband works at the Department of Defense, they even started calling themselves the corporation, which they're not, but they call themselves that. And it didn't solve anything. It just put a different cast on it. So I think what we need is not just for business people to come in and say you got to be more like a business. I think there needs to be like this interdisciplinary approach where you get some philosopher types that'll work on, say, defining and articulating an ethos, help people think about it. And then you need some political science types that could help out with, say, defining government's place in society, in a democratic society, or the kind of democracy that we have. What should government be doing? What do we want government to be doing? And then you need the business people to come in after that's been decided and say, okay, now here's how we can implement what's been decided. Okay, but I think that dialogue has to take place. Otherwise, I think that the efforts at reform they're just like darts, shooting darts, and it's just not working. Where I work, it's not working. Where my husband works in the federal, it's not working. Is everything cool down at Allegheny County? No problems at Allegheny County. So that's too small. You can't be anonymous there, right? Okay. But here's some of the issues. I call them issues. They're actually, this list is like some reforms. Like, for example, privatization. Some people look at government services that are being provided and say, the private sector could do this better. Okay? Because if we put this out in the private sector, there's where the profit motive is. So if people are motivated to make a profit, then they'll be more efficient. Which seems logical, right? But the point is that, well, if your motivation is to make profit, then some things that maybe should be considered, you're going to have different priorities. And think about the prison systems, because some jurisdictions, some states or counties have privatized their prison system. Okay? Would you want to be a prisoner in a private system? I don't think I would be. Okay, I think the food would probably be really bad, which someone would say, what's wrong with giving bad food to prisoners? They're criminals. But I mean, think about what should government do? Okay, criminals they're enemies of the state. They violated, they offended the people of the state. They offended the government. The government tried them, found them guilty, passed a sentence on them, and is responsible now for carrying out the sentence, and we say rehabilitating them. How much rehabilitation is going to take place? Now maybe I'm cynical, in a system where the prison warden has to show a healthy profit every quarter. I don't think that kind of thing is going to work. And frankly, maybe that would be a good idea then. If it's privatized and no one wants to be a prisoner in a privatized system, then that would take care of the crime problem. But I think there are just some functions, which leads me to my next, that they're inherently governmental functions. And we shouldn't be turning inherently governmental functions over to the private sector. Certainly policy decisions. We can't be hiring contractors and putting them in policy-making decisions because of the conflict of interest that would result from that. You have a policymaker as a chief information officer for an agency, and he just might be subconsciously making policy that would tend to be lucrative for his company, his IT company. We got to think about these things, but more and more you see the government, if they're not privatizing, what they're doing is they're having government contracts to take care of functions that government workers used to do. So, for example, government, when they needed a system, they would go to the government workers, and the government workers would build the system for them and hire the people they needed if they didn't currently have the people. Now what they do is they have a contract, and the contractor comes in and builds the system. And some people say, well, that makes sense because the contractor has the expertise right now. You bring them in, they build the system, and then they leave, and you don't have all these people that are now government servants that you can't fire, etc. But you know what? You can't fire the contractors either. You can't get rid of them because they build the system in a way that they have to be there to maintain it year after year after year. They retain the rights to the system. They don't turn over the code, the source code, so no one else, or it's proprietary. So instead of paying government workers forever for this system, we're just paying the contractor. So did we save the taxpayer money? No. Okay, did we serve the best interest of the taxpayer? I don't know. I think, like I said, that's a discussion, a debate that has to be taking place. One of the problems is the relatively lower pay compared to the private sector, especially beginning. Okay, down in Maryland, an accountant, an accounting major, brand new graduate, can probably get about $60,000 a year starting pay. If you go work for the state of Maryland, it's going to be somewhere $30,000 to $35,000. Start with the federal government, it's going to be somewhere $35,000 to $40,000, probably starting pay. 35, maybe to 42. Okay, so you say, why would a rational 22-year-old person with college debt take the $40,000 or $35,000 job instead of the $60,000 job, right? You're all thinking that. And I mean, it's a good consideration, but like I said back before, I think if we would consciously, as a society, read the kind of public morality that makes people choose early, oh, I want to be a government worker. Like they could even have government worker Halloween costumes, you know, like just, but that just doesn't happen. I mean, it's actually absurd to think about, isn't it? But it's, well, increasing number of appointed positions. I'm in an appointed position, okay? What an appointed position is, there's different levels of service. There's protected or permanent service, and there's appointed. And I serve at the pleasure of the Comptroller of Maryland, which